it won't be long before I get my reward.
We're still partners, right?
We were never partners.
Ooh boy, Thundercats really spoiled me. In 1985, Filmation released a spin-off from the show He-Man and the Masters of the Universe called She-Ra, Princess of Power. While it was indeed a show produced cheaply to advertise a toy line aimed at girls, it does possess a strong story that has potential to make a good reboot, provided that the writers understand the core of the show. The show itself begins not on She-Ra's world, but rather on Eternia, the home world of the sorceress of the show has a vision of She-Ra's sword. To this she calls Adam, He-Man's alter ego, to send him to the planet Etheria, where he's to find the person meant to wield the sword. After running into the Horde's foot soldiers, He-Man learns of the Great Rebellion. After a scuffle with the foot soldiers, the Horde sends a platoon led by the Horde's force commander, Adora. Through a circumstance, He-Man loses his sword and attempts to use the other sword on Adora, but it resonates with her and he realizes that she is the one the sword is meant for. He tries to convince her that the Horde is evil, but she disagrees with him and says that the Horde is simply here to maintain order, and she promptly captures him instead. However, she is shaken by his words, so she takes his advice and goes out to seek the truth as to whether or not the Horde is actually evil. Of course, when she does find this out, she goes straight to their leader, Hordak, who, being a reasonable leader of villainous people, has her brainwashed yet again by a magical spell. Ultimately, it takes He-Man being freed by the rebellion and then captured again in order to convince her that the Horde is definitely, most certainly, evil. However, this is not enough, for only the sword that the sorceress gave her could actually break the spell. And it does when she holds it aloft and shouts,
"For the honor of Grayskull!"
After several instances of interdimensional shenanigans and a death ray, the series properly kicks off with Adora taking over as leader of the rebellion. The rebellion is a small group with a core team and some additional members recruited over the show's run. The core team got the most exposure during the some odd 20 episodes that it researched, so additional members won't be covered too much here. She-Ra, or rather Adora, is the heart of the rebellion. Naturally, she is the one the team relies on to bail them out of whatever dire situation happens in each episode, yet her overwhelming and varying powers pale in comparison to her most important character trait, empathy. This one trait is what lets her recruit characters like Starfall, Seahawk, and the Trolls. This empathy also ties into her powers. Unlike He-Man, she can speak with animals and even heal them. While some may consider this aspect to be a bit cliché, it is a manifestation of her caring nature. This selflessness is the linchpin of her as a character and the glue that keeps the rebellion together. For the reboot to function as a story, this aspect needs to be retained or the story will fall flat. Bo and Cowl are nearly inseparable partners. Where Bo is the courageous archer whose antics get him into trouble more often than not, Cowl is the cowardly bird creature that tries to avoid trouble. He may not be the best of the bunch, but he is the most entertaining. I just hope the personality can carry over into the reboot because I do not know where they are going with this guy. Glimmer was the old leader of the rebellion, and it clearly shows why she stepped down. Of the main members of the rebellion, she did the least during my time watching the show. Perhaps it's because her powers are less combat-oriented, but really, there are a few times where she actually contributes to the rebellion's operations. Madame Raz is a mixed bag for me. Personally, I'm not very fond of inept mages that aren't named Schmendrick or Ronald Weasley. On the other hand, she bungles her spells in a very interesting way. A simple swapped word changes the entire spell, often in a comedic but nonetheless effective way. Well, for the most part. Her voice can get a little grating, so I could take it or leave it, really.
Razzle dazzle, doozle day. Let this poison now go away.
If she doesn't show up in the reboot, I won't miss her that much. There are a few other characters that join the rebellion later on, however they didn't show up enough for me to get a real feel for them. Save for one, Seahawk. He's a particularly important side character, and not just because he's a pirate with a freaking laser cutlass. He's a testament to Adora's empathy and insight. When she meets him, she knows that despite him shipping goods to the Horde, he doesn't really want to work for them. He claims that he isn't truly loyal and is free, but over the course of the episode, she wins him over by showing how reprehensible the Horde is. Not only joining the rebels, but he also develops a crush on Adora. The last rebel that I'm going to cover is sort of an unofficial member. He is, of course, though instead of going into his characteristics, it's his role in the story that is far more interesting. As said in the summary, he does help Adora break away from the Horde's control, but he also takes her back to Eternia. There, she finally reunites with her family. However, she does not stay there. She resolves to return to Etheria and help the rebellion. This moment establishes Adora's selfless nature. I know that He-Man won't be making an appearance in the reboot, but they should have a scene or moment that gives her a similar temptation, but she ultimately resolves to help the rebellion. The Horde is a massive, galaxy-spanning force. Thankfully, we only have to deal with a few members that actually stand out. Hordak, while not the biggest baddie in the universe, is still a significant threat. Sure, he functions as your typical Saturday morning cartoon villain that always loses in the end of the episodes, but I do have to say he does have some screen presence. Nowhere near Mum-Ra's bellowing voice, but he is at least somewhat intimidating. The only thing I'd change is that snort he's got. It just takes away from that. Shadow Weaver is Hordak's second in command. She serves as his magician, and she can be dangerously competent. Much like Mum-Ra and the Thundercats, it often takes an exterior factor that she did not expect to foil her plans. She doesn't have too much in the way of characterization, but supposedly she was once a sorceress that sacrificed her morals and beauty for power. Overall, she seems like a good character to include. No real changes needed, save for a less annoying and gravelly voice.
We will take the woods from the rebels.
Catra, another notable member of the Horde, seems to be Hordak's number 2 lackey. She seems to present herself as a femme fatale, dressing in all red and being able to turn into a giant panther at the moment's notice. It's clear that she's in the reboot, and she looks alright. I just really hope they found a good voice actress for her.
Oh, of course.
You have no idea how annoying that gets. On paper, it's quite simple to make a reboot about She-Ra. Core theme is that selflessness and empathy wins over the hearts of people instead of fear. Yet the redesign is somewhat concerning. The discarding of female elements in She-Ra's redesign are at odds with the very feminine aspects of the original's personality. Should the reboot stray in its writing and make the rebellion merciless and without empathy, even for its enemies, the story will fall flat on its face. That said, I certainly have more confidence in this, as opposed to a certain other reboot